So let's talk about the issue of and the race for county sheriff. Tim Svenson in our studio this morning. Tim, thanks for coming and being a part of the show here.
Yeah, good morning, Dave. Thanks for having me again.
So let's talk about, boy, there's so many different things to talk about as far as the sheriff's race. First of all, why vote for Tim Svenson for Yamhill County Sheriff?
Well, as I've been telling people throughout the county as I go out and meet with them, they ask me the same question, why are you qualified to be the next sheriff? And the short answer is that for the last 8 years, this is what I've been doing. I've worked directly with the sheriff on all sorts of different projects. I've been an administrative sergeant, which is the right-hand man to the captain, and the last 2 years as the operations captain. So I have a really good understanding of what our office is all about, where the budget is, where our resources need to be specialized in, and how we can do things better and where we can save money. And it's a daily change, and you have to have a good working knowledge of where our office is today in order to keep it moving forward.
It's kind of a perfect storm in law enforcement. I've got a lot of friends in the law enforcement community. I've covered City Hall, police, and fire for 2 decades, and we're seeing, my hat's off to you guys. I totally support police, fire, and everything you do, especially right now, because you've got kind of a perfect storm. You've got medical marijuana, you've got Second Amendment, you've got crime, and we just got a news release here, and we'll talk about it in just a moment. This isn't local, it's from Malala, which is kind of a chilling story, where apparently, and we're just getting the very first part of this story, it looks like there may have been 2 white males in their 20s who were hiding in a closet and surprised a female victim when she came home. No signs of forced entry. Apparently they'd gotten into the home before she came home, hid in the home, and then surprised her when she came home. So that's kind of a chilling story. We've seen the stories of home invasions and so on and so forth. We're looking at sheriff's offices with tight budgets. Boy, and my hat's off to you, because sometimes, especially late at night in some rural areas of Oregon, you may have an officer respond to a call and backup might be 60 miles away, and so he's there by himself. That's got to make you stop and think for a little bit. How do you guys face that?
Well, in Yamhill County, we've been very fortunate with the way that we have been fiscally responsible with our money. A lot of these counties are having issues because they were dependent on outside resources, federal grants, federal programs that the government kept telling us at some point that's going to go away. And some counties realigned their spending and realigned their budgets to account for that, and other counties, every time the federal government came back and said, okay, here, we're going to do it for another year, they just kind of said, okay, well, we'll deal with that next year. So in Yamhill County, we knew that was going to come about 6-7 years ago, so we started realigning the way we're spending money. So yes, we're fortunate to have a 24/7 police coverage, 365 days a year. And we have 4 contract cities that continue to send money to our office every year for their police services. They trust us to come in and protect their citizens just as if they had their own police department. And so in order to maintain the staff where we're at and to continue with the contracts, you have to have that working relationship and that partnership with those cities and with the county commissioners, and also understand that there are some outside forces that are going to affect your budget, and you try to prepare for that the best you can.
One of the things that I've noticed, especially here in Oregon, is the working relationship, the mutual aid agreements, but the relationships between neighboring departments are really good in all the cities I've worked at in Oregon and other cities and other states. When you have kind of border issues, there was a fire department issue in southwest Idaho, in a metropolitan area there, Boise area, where there was a little bit of a rub there, and you always hate to see that. But here in Oregon, we have a good working relationship with area agencies. Now, I'm leading up to a question here. Polk County is looking at, right now, we have a news release from the sheriff saying that effective March 29th, I believe it was, patrol deputies only going to be on the road 10 hours a day. We had a county commission candidate in here who was doing right along with the deputy from Yamhill County. and they had to go cover a call in Polk County. The question I've got is, if it comes to a situation where Yamhill deputies are being pulled over into Polk County to respond to calls for service, and maybe there's no trooper available, maybe he's down south somewhere, does that leave Yamhill County open, and at what point do we say, listen, we got to cover our home turf first?
That's a good question. We actually addressed this a couple months ago with the sheriff and the supervisor of the West Valley. We know that there's going to be times where there's going to be emergency calls coming in where it's going to require an immediate response. And we've always said, and like you said, we've always had a good working relationship with all the agencies around the county, to include our neighboring counties, that if there's an emergency and they don't have anybody available, we're going to go. We're not going to not respond just because it's in a different county. What we have to watch is how much of that is an emergency response that requires immediate assistance, and how much of it is just the day-to-day routine type stuff that can be handled at a different time. And so we've asked our supervisor out in the West Valley to start tracking the number of times that we do get called into Polk County for two reasons. One, to illustrate exactly how much calls for service they are having out in that area, because Polk County may want that information to go back to their commissioners and their citizens to say, okay, we really need this funding because look how many times Yamhill County has come to assist us in this area because we couldn't. The other piece is it'll give me a good understanding of, are we actually out there on a routinely basis because it is actually an emergency, or are we doing just their day-to-day type investigations? And then that conversation would have to happen with my counterpart in Polk County and say, listen, we are here to support you and to assist you in any way we can, but there is going to be that time where our resources are going to have to be concentrating in Yamhill County. The benefit is that end of the county, the way it works is there's large parts of our county that you can't get to unless you drive through Polk County. So just the near makeup of that part of our county and that part of Polk County is we routinely have deputies out in that area. And you mentioned state police. State police is in the same position where they're limiting the number of troopers they have out on state highways. And so they may be only trooper between here and the coast, and they're up in the Sherwood area dealing with a crash. They very well can't head on out to out towards the casino. So it is something that we are going to have to watch, and that's one of the things is the captain right now is that I have to weigh those responses and determine whether or not it's a benefit as a whole to Polk County and our county, or if we're just picking up their slack because they just don't have a person out there.
So, for example, using this example in Malala, Oregon, let's say, how many deputies do you have on at night in Yamhill County? Do you have 2 cars out or 1? Or?
Well, our rural teams are made up of 4 deputies and 1 sergeant. So depending on if there's someone in training or if there's people on vacation or sick, we have on average anywhere between 2 to 3 staff at minimum working out there. Not to mention the additional contract cities. Those deputies also work various shifts, but I don't count them as part of the rural staff because they're technically assigned to a city, similar to like the city of Newburgh or the city of McMinnville. They will be available to respond in rural county if they need to, but they're assigned specifically to that city.
So if you got a call, no Polk County deputy on, and you got a call from a lady who was hiding in a closet or came home and there are 2 guys in her home, and for nefarious reasons, you would go on that call.
Correct. In that type of call, we would head down that way, and of course, at the same time that we're responding, we're also in communication with their dispatch center, asking them to go through their protocol to make sure that the after-hours on-call people are contacted, so that they know what situation we're responding to. It's going to be one of those issues where if we respond to an emergency call in another county, it's the same way we do it right now in our own county. If we respond to a call similar to this in Amity or Carlton, for example, we're going to be there, but we're going to attempt to contact the local jurisdiction out of courtesy and out of respect to just say, hey, we're here in your city, this is the call, do you want to come out on the scene, or do you want us just to handle it for you? It's a little easier in our county to just handle it because the citizens of Amity and Carlton also pay a portion of county taxes. The hard part's going to be if we're in Polk County and they're asking us to take the entire investigation. And some of these investigations can take up a lot of time, and a lot of follow-up is required, and that is where we're going to have to keep an eye on how we're spending our time.
I think a lot of citizens are concerned. You know, everybody reads the newspaper, listens to radio, TV, hears the reports. The bad guys know that there's this challenge as far as manpower, and so one of the concerns I think people have is that the bad guys are going to say, well, happy hunting grounds, and there is... I might not get caught in Polk County because they may not have patrols out, and so it tends to attract the criminal element. What would you say to the citizens that are concerned about that?
You know, there is a portion of criminals that pay attention to the patrols, when people are working, where they're at. I would say the majority of your criminals don't have that much intelligence, and the reason why I say that is they are constantly looking over their shoulders, thinking that there's a police officer around every corner, and we want them to continue thinking that. And so the way we address that, if we have issues with scheduling, or we see that we're starting to see an increase in crime at a time where our schedules aren't covering, we make sure that we constantly rotate our shifts through so that at any given time there either could be someone working or there couldn't be someone working, more specifically in our contract cities. That's always been a concern down in Sheridan and Willamina, that we have a set schedule, a set number of deputies that are working, and how we offset that is if there is a gap, we make sure that our rural deputies are traveling through there periodically so they see a patrol car driving through the city so that they're always on edge and they're always on, always looking behind their shoulder. But at the same time, when you're in a situation like Polk County, it's going to make it very difficult if you have to reduce your patrol shift down to only 10 hours a day. That leaves 14 hours of unpatrolled time that you are hoping that the state police and other agencies are able to assist, but we all have our own business that we have to attend to. So it's my job as the sheriff to make sure we don't get to that point. And the citizens deserve the protection. And when we take that oath to uphold the Constitution and the state Constitution, we're also swearing that we will protect them. We will provide them a protection, a safe place to live, to raise their family, to visit. And I have to be able to make sure that every day when I come in the office, if I'm not doing something appropriate or I'm wasting money in a project because it's just not working, I have to be able to stand up and say, okay, we're done with this, we're going to move on to another area, and we're not going to stop wasting our money.
Okay, we're talking to Tim Svenson, candidate for Yamhill County Sheriff. Tim, is there any way to use possible volunteers to take up some of the workload so that deputies can be on patrol and out catching the bad guy?
You know, we have a very large volunteer corps in our office. We have over 100 volunteers, from search and rescue to posse to cadets to our volunteer response unit, and our search and rescue. I mean, we've got tons of people out there. And yes, we do use a lot of those volunteers to take up a little bit of the administrative and some of the data collecting and minor things that, you know, it doesn't necessarily take a certified patrol deputy to do. And what that allows us to do is that allows us to dedicate our time and concentrate in a more focused area. For instance, we have a radar trailer that we just recently received a contribution from a citizen, and this radar trailer, which we've had one before, but this one is state-of-the-art. It's got all the bells and whistles on it, and it has a computer on it that will analyze traffic. So not only do we get to take that unit out to a specific area where citizens are complaining of traffic and speeds, it will tell us exactly what time of day, how many vehicles are driving through, what the highest speed is, what the average speed is. So that gives us a better analysis of what it is, and so that piece of equipment can sit there for days, and then we can analyze that data and then determine when we need to address those high traffic areas with our deputies. But the setup of that and the analysis of that and running that program is managed by our volunteers. And takes a lot of time that they're able to put towards it that doesn't take up time of a certified deputy.
Let's talk about two issues, Second Amendment gun rights and then medical marijuana. Let's talk about medical marijuana first. All three of you, Tim Casey, Tim Svenson, Joe Shipley, were in the candidates forum in Newburgh yesterday. None of you liked the fact that we're dealing with medical marijuana dispensaries, and you all three agree that eventually we're probably looking at recreational use of marijuana legal in the state of Oregon. That's not the case now, but all indications are that could be in our future. So medical marijuana dispensaries, first of all, your position on that?
Well, like I said yesterday, I don't think there's a place for the dispensaries in our county. The law that was pushed through and passed had a lot of flaws in it. They sent it to the Rules and Advisory Committee, which Sheriff Jack Crabtree had the opportunity to sit on. But the law was already set in place, and when the Rules and Advisory Committee sat down and started talking about the things that they thought that needed to be changed, and we're talking about issues that needed to be changed not just under the impression of law enforcement, but also for the proponents of medical marijuana. You know, some of the longtime supporters of the program even acknowledged that there were some flaws in this law, and they needed to send it back to the legislature. The problem was that the Rules and Advisory Committee were their hands were tied to, they could only put rules in place that met what the law had stated. So all the changes that needed to be made that they recommended to be changed need to be changed in the law. So they sent it back, and the legal counsel finally came back and said, you know what, you're right, this could probably cause some issues with this law. We're going to allow cities and counties to put a moratorium for at least a year to allow the legislation to fix this. So I've applauded every city in the county. I think every city except for City of McMinnville and Dundee have put a moratorium in place, not allowing them to show up, including the county. And what that allows law enforcement to do is it gives us another year to start planning for that piece. You know, like I was listening to Stan earlier this morning, he had mentioned that, you know, if it's a medical reason, which I am a strong supporter of the fact that there are people out there that need it for medical reasons. But when you go to the doctor and the doctor prescribes you a drug, there's already a place that you go to that's well regulated, well controlled, and it's a licensed pharmacist that's divvying out the prescription. They are restricting the amount of Vicodin or antibiotics that you're getting, telling you can only take this size pill for this long. That doesn't happen with medical marijuana. It's just, here you go, now you can have it. There's no gauging of how much, what the quantity is. You can buy a lot of it at one time. And, you know, there's going to be a lot of issues that we're going to be dealing with when it comes to impairment on the road and the issues of it being more available to juveniles. You know, I talked with a gal who works with our prevention in Yamhill County, and she was telling me about just a random survey that they did in the city of Dayton in the school district. And they had approximately about 40-some people over, I think it was in 2012 or 2013, that were either disciplined or expelled or suspended from school because of possession of marijuana. And when she did just a generic survey, an unofficial one, just talking to all 40 of those people, I believe it was around 32 or 34 of those indicated that they got it from a friend who had a medical card. So the medical program that was already in place was already allowing the marijuana to get into the hands of the wrong people. And now we're providing another opportunity where you just get to walk into a store with a card and walk out with pounds of it at one time. And I think that's an issue for Yamhill County.
One of the things that was mentioned in the sheriff's forum yesterday was, you know, these guys are going in with a lot of money to buy marijuana and then walking out with a lot of marijuana. And you could have people waiting for them either for the money or the marijuana or both.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, California, Washington, Colorado, they've all had experiences. Well, we've even had some in Portland. We've had a lot of these dispensaries already up and running unofficially. And but yes, those are the type of issues that you see. Anytime you have drugs, money together, you're going to have a problem. And you have at least dedicated locations that a lot of people are going to know that are going to have a lot of both. They're going to have a lot of money on hand, and they're going to have a lot of marijuana. And we've seen it already where they've come in and they've attempted to rob the place. They've stood up people and they're leaving and taken their marijuana or their money. It's one of those issues that it is going to cause issues. When the Medical Marijuana Act came out, in fact, when we started to allow people to grow marijuana, at the very beginning of that, we saw a large increase in people trying to steal marijuana plants from the marijuana grow. We've had several people. We actually had a shooting in Yamhill County where a grower had shot someone who was approaching his property attempting to steal his marijuana. We've had several instances of that nature in our county that we've had to deal with already, and that was just with the Medical Marijuana Act allowing people to grow it on their property. Now we're going to be in a position where once it's grown and it's distributed, it's now sitting at the facility. And the problem with the law right now is there's no controls on the grower when they take it from their house to the dispensary. It's their word that when they leave their house and they show up at the dispensary and the dispensary takes in the marijuana that they only had 5 pounds. If they left their house with 7 pounds but stopped off at someone else's house, dropped off 2, and then go to the dispensary with 5, yeah, once it's at the dispensary, they're going to track it. They're going to log it in their books, and they're going to keep an accurate number of it. But it's that transportation between the house and the dispensary that has no controls whatsoever. And there's just too much that's going to happen. And in law enforcement, it's in our best interest to move slowly when it comes to these new laws. Watch what the state of Washington and Colorado is going through. Let's not just jump in too quickly. And the way Oregon is I'm sure Oregon is going to be moving the same direction as Washington and Colorado. That's just the nature of Oregon. But like Stan said, it's going to be the responsibility of the elected officials to try to voice our opinion, our stance, and advocate for that as much as we can so that the general citizen out there who's the voting public will vote the right way to not allow that to happen.
Second Amendment, gun rights. Let's talk about another thorny issue. A lot of people are concerned that the federal government is eventually at some point going to try to take our guns away. You mentioned, in fact, all the candidates have mentioned the running for sheriff. Every forum that you're at, you're asked this question. There's people concerned about it.
Yeah, and I've had people come up to me just when I'm out walking around talking to citizens out in the community. That's a lot of the questions, like you said, the two big issues are the medical marijuana and the Second Amendment rights. Our office a long time ago stood up to a public records request where an individual wanted a record of every concealed handgun license holder in our county. And we said, no, we're not going to release that. There's no public reason for that being released. And it's been upheld, and other counties have done the same thing, and it's been upheld by court decisions that, no, we're not going to just randomly release our information on CHL. And that ties directly to the position I have on the Second Amendment. I believe that the Second Amendment was put there for a reason. The Constitution was put together for a reason, and when we take that oath of our office to uphold not only the state and local laws and jurisdiction and the state constitution, we're also upholding the U.S. Constitution. And the Second Amendment provides citizens the right to bear arms, and I'm going to protect that right. Where it's going to become an issue is the federal government is continuing to try to limit those rights. And I've never been a fan of legislation that is going to further regulate law-abiding citizens. As Stan mentioned earlier, he doesn't want just the criminals to have the guns. The problem with the gun control and all those type of issues is criminals are going to get guns no matter what. They're going to have them. They have them right now. Most of them are felons, and they're not supposed to have them. So we have all these laws on the books that are supposed to prevent these people from having these guns, but they still have them. And we deal with them on a regular basis. We arrest them, we prosecute them, they get charged, they go to jail, they do their sentence, they come out, and they still are possessing their guns. So why continue to add legislation on the books that are going to restrict the rights of the law-abiding citizens, those people who are following the laws, who have the legally purchased these firearms, have them for multiple reasons, not just for personal protection, but for hunting and for hobbies and for collections and for just recreational shooting, and who have gone through the course and obtained their concealed handgun license and are doing all the right things. We shouldn't be continuing to put laws into place. Now, the sheriff doesn't have a direct control over whether or not the federal government or even the state puts a law into effect. But what I do have the ability to do is to have those conversations and that open communication with the state and our representatives through the Oregon Sheriff's Association, and by myself being in Yamhill County. We're very close to Salem, so it's very easy for me to make a trip down there and voice my opinion and advocate for the rights of our citizens.
Especially if you've got a deputy or an office, for example, in Polk County that can't guarantee coverage overnight. And then if you take the guns away, they're sitting ducks. Yeah,
and that's the thing, is that, we don't have issues, like you said, with the people who are the law-abiding citizens causing issues with the possession of their guns. It's the criminals, and the Second Amendment is there for people to for the right to bear arms for their protection. And this is a time where people need protection, and if law enforcement isn't able to be there, then they have to be able to protect their family. And we don't have issues with people randomly going out and committing crimes because now they have these guns available to them. It's that small percentage of the criminal element that are committing these crimes, and you have a very large percent of people who are the law-abiding citizens that just want them for their own protection just in case they need it.
Okay, last few minutes of the show. Tim Svenson, candidate for Yamhill County Sheriff. Vote by mail ballot sitting in front of me. Why do I put the check mark on Tim Svenson's name?
Well, like I said before, the position of sheriff is an elected position. The office of the sheriff is very important to sheriffs in Yamhill County and to sheriffs across the state. And it's an important role, and it takes the right person to do that. The citizens of Yamhill County deserve someone who has the education, the experience, the qualifications, and the working knowledge of what the office is about. And my entire career has been based off of serving the citizens in a leadership role and getting them the best bang for their buck, I guess you could say, when it comes to law enforcement services. And I've actively been doing that for the last 8 years, and if I was put in that position tomorrow, it would just be another day at the office, and we would just continue to move forward. And like you had mentioned before, when it comes to community partnerships, it's going to be really important for us in moving on in the future when budgets continue to get tighter, for us to work with the local jurisdictions, and to not just the local jurisdictions but our neighboring counties. And with my campaign, I've received the endorsements of Sheriff Jack Crabtree and the 3 previous sheriffs, retired Sheriff Norm Hand, retired Sheriff Lee Vasquez, retired Sheriff Glenn Shipman. But I've also received the endorsements of the Lincoln County, Tillamook County, Marion County, Washington County, Clackamas County, and Multnomah County sheriffs have all endorsed me based off of the experience that I've had working with them in other arenas.
And you also have one there in front of you.
Well, I was just going to say, this morning, hot off the press, the Newburgh Graphic came out and endorsed me as well. So I've got the endorsements of the News Register and the Newburgh Graphic for taking over where Crabtree left off.
And if you want to hear this interview again, you can go to our website, KLYC.us. Here in a few minutes, we're going to have it posted there. Go to news, recent interviews. You'll be able to listen to it. We'll also have it on the KLYC News channel as a rotating basis with the other interviews that we've been doing for candidates. Tim, do you have a website or Facebook page?
I do have a Facebook page and a website. The website is Swenson4 with the number 4 sheriff.com. And there's a link on that website to go straight to the Facebook link as well.
And Svenson spelled?
Svenson.
Okay. Tim, thank you for being with us on the show today. Good luck to you and all the other candidates. And you can also, we're doing a straw poll on our website, KLYC.us. You can go in and vote for your candidate. We're kind of interested in who's in the running and who is leading, and what you're thinking of as an electorate who you would like to have in the 2 county commissioners candidates offices and the sheriff's office. Please vote. And no matter how this straw poll comes out, do not let it discourage you from actually taking the actual ballot and going and voting. Maybe your candidate is leading the pack and you say, well, he's leading, so I don't need to vote. Everybody needs to vote. I have covered a lot of elections in a couple decades, and I have seen elections where one vote made the difference. I know we all have. So your vote is very, very important, and it's just one of those things, you know, I'm getting on the pulpit here again, but if we don't use it, we'll lose it. And you need to practice your right at the polls. You've got to vote. That's people have fought and died for us to have that right, and we need to honor their sacrifice by doing it. Tim, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, Dave.